What's going down, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Commander Ad Populum. With you, we are Commander for the people, by the people, for the people. If this is your first Commander Ad Populum, welcome to the show. It's always good to have new listeners. If you're a returning listener, it's good to have you back. Huge shout out to FusionGamingOnline.com. They are the official sponsor of Commander Ad Populum. You can head over there for all of your gaming needs, and of course you can check out themanabase.com where all of Fusion Gaming sponsored content exists. There's a ton of great content alongside Commander Ad Populum there, so I would encourage everybody to check it out. We've got a crazy show for you today. No set retrospective for anybody who came here for that. I'm sorry, we are taking a little bit of a break post Urza block and nose diving straight back down into the ground for next week's Mercadian Mask kickoff. Today, I have an amazing story for you, and I'm not even trying to hype it up to make it sound like it's a bit more than it is. This is truly amazing. Before we get to it though, quick social media shoutouts. At CAD Popcast on Twitter, Commander Ad Populum on Facebook. There'll be threads for episode 30 there. That's this episode. You can leave any comments that you want on either of those platforms. I'll see them all. And as I get to them, there'll be a few kind of call-outs for what people do, or if anybody wants to offer any encouragement to any of the other listeners that are out there commenting. Of course, patreon.com/CADPopcast is where you can go if you wanted to help the show grow or support the show financially. We do have a little Discord community, which is sort of the best place, I think, for kind of personal support within the Commander Ad Populum community. I know a lot of people there lean on each other for this and that, or magic advice, or just general kind of camaraderie. It's a good place to be. So, without any further ado, let's get to today's community topic. This is unreal. This is unreal, you guys. Just after this. Okay, so a little while ago, I met online, of course, through Commander Cookout Podcast, a listener named Sam. Sam's from New Zealand, and he was kind of turned on to Commander Ad Populum through whatever means he found. He found the show and related to it because we often talk about things like, you know, we did a couple episodes on depression and anxiety. We did a couple episodes on substance use. And his story that he told me via email kind of relates to the former, and his family and his 2 children, and of course playing Magic and playing Commander, and it's amazing. So he tells me that when he plays a game of Magic, it's typically online with his brother who lives in Arizona, like half a world away, and they play some kind of limited or cube or something because that's easier for him to sort of take it all in, take the whole game in. When he plays a game of Commander in person, he has to memorize the entire board state, mostly by the name of the cards that are on the battlefield. And that's because Sam is legally blind. Let that sink in. When you play Magic, particularly Commander, you're surveying the board, your hand, the opponents, what they're doing, their kind of emotional state. You know, when they're counting cards in their hand or doing mental math, you're taking all that in, and that informs decisions that you make throughout the game. Sam can't do any of that. So the way that he explains it to me, of course, because he goes throughout his life functioning, and I'm sure if you saw him on the street, you would maybe not know that he's blind, because he says the first question that he gets is, "But you can see me, right?" Or, "How much can you see?" You can see. People are telling him this, it sounds like, in his email. So he describes it like, when he was texting me, he said, if a normal person can see everything that's in front of them from horizon to horizon, or however you want to theorize it, he sees what that person sees if they were looking through a pinhole on a piece of paper. So he says he's got about 1% or less of a normal person's field of vision. So when he looks you in the eye, he can only see your eye. Not even your other eye, not what your mouth is doing, not your facial expression. Similarly, if he looks down at the battlefield in a game of Magic, he can only see one card at a time, or just the name of the card, or just the mana cost of a card. If you can imagine how close your 2 eyeballs are together, he can only see one of them at a time. And this man plays Magic. This is amazing. So I want to give a huge shout out to Sam. He says he doesn't play a whole ton in person or at an LGS because he is a little bit nervous or apprehensive to go out. What if he trips over something? What if he can't read somebody's body language and they're not liking what he's doing? And to that, I would say, go out, do the best that you can, explain yourself, have a game. I know if I met anybody in my LGS where I play once or twice a week that had the ability to play a game as complex as Magic without being able to see, I would 100% want to play with that person. So Sam, speaking directly at you, I'm sure there's other people out there that are as amazed at what you can do without sight as I am. Go play with those people. They want to meet you. And that goes for anybody else who has some form of physical disability or mental illness, or if you're a person that is recovering from some sort of substance abuse. Lots of these things tie into each other, and that's why Magic is such a great game. I've played against people or with people, alongside people that have various forms of physical disabilities, mental illness, people who've told me they suffer from depression and anxiety, people who've had panic attacks right in games that I'm playing with them in. And you just have to be sensitive and supportive to those people and say, take whatever time you need. I've played games with intellectually disabled people, and I kid you not, some of those games are the games that you learn the most about yourself, the most about Magic, the most about having fun and what fun is, because the game brings all people together for this common purpose, and it's just the greatest. So anyways, back to Sam's story. He's telling me all this, and I'm reading all of it, and he says, but it's not all doom and gloom. He's the father of 2 wonderful children, a 1-year-old and 3-year-old, so right on either side of how old my son is. And he tells me, much like in Magic, he's had to adapt and evolve, and that is true of all things. Walking down the street, getting groceries, regular everyday stuff that we all take for granted. He says to me that he realized whatever he ended up doing for a job would not be contingent upon his vision, of course. So he made it his goal for companies to want to employ him based on his brain, his knowledge. And now he works as a professional consultant, he says, primarily in the world of business transformations or business strategies. That's super interesting. That's sort of the kind of thing that I did. And that's sort of the kind of background that I was raised under or in, with my parents being small business owners. And I think that that's amazing. So Sam, good on you. I would encourage you or anybody who feels like you, whether that is some level of apprehension to go out based on XYZ thing, whatever that thing is, go out there. Expanding outside of your comfort zone can be extremely liberating. Doing something that is a little bit scary, something that you don't have a ton of experience in, can open up so many possibilities. So I highly encourage anybody who's listening, not just Sam, I highly encourage anybody that's out there, go out and try something new. Go to an LGS. Who knows? Maybe you don't like your LGS. Maybe you want to try playing MTG Arena or whatever it is. Just do it. All you have to do is decide. I tell that to my wife, Rebecca, all the time. Whether it be, something work related, something with raising our son, parenting. Parenting is challenging, and sometimes you have these moments where you think that you don't know what to do. Or extremely trivial examples. You go to the grocery store and there's like 5 different kinds of pasta sauces, and I'm not a pasta sauce connoisseur. This is extremely trivial. I apologize to anybody where I flip from something as profound as being blind to something as trivial as pasta sauce. But if there's 5 different kinds of pasta sauces and you don't know which one's going to be the best, just pick one. If you just pick one, you decide. That's your decision. You pick this one. You pick that one, and you go home and eat it, and it's good or it's bad. If it's good, well, buy it again. If it's bad, buy a different one next time. And I use extremely trivial examples like that when I teach people, when I talk to my wife, or when I was a coach, because when it's something as simple as, oh yeah, just pick the pasta sauce, whatever, this one's got a good picture, or this one's 50 cents less, you're eliminating things that are not relevant to the situation at hand or the decision at hand. Or if you just decide, you're taking your anxieties, your inhibitions, or whatever it is that's stopping you from moving forward, you're taking that and you're setting it aside and you're just picking, you're just moving forward. And I promise you that that's liberating. So Sam, good on you. Playing Magic, legally blind, amazing. If anybody out there has a similar experience or some adversity they are overcoming or have overcome in the past, let me know. I'd love to tell your story if it relates to Magic the Gathering in some way to inspire the community at large out there. And you never know. Most of the people that contact me or that I have dialogue with in regards to stories like this start or finish their message to me with, "You helped me so much." And that was a direct result of the people before them reaching out and having their story told. So if you have a story or, like I said, some adversity that you're overcoming through Magic or with Magic, let me know, because you are probably going to help somebody if you have that story be told. Okay, for today's technical section, I am going to focus on some actual techie type stuff. I'm not going to break out the old comprehensive rulebook and be a rules lawyer or anything, but I did want to spend some time on actual gameplay and the physical manipulation of cards, because whether you be inexperienced or playing decks that are complex or find yourself in complex scenarios like we do when we play Commander, I've got a few tips that I think will really help smooth out everybody's gameplay experience. So I'm attacking this topic sort of from a standpoint of speeding up gameplay, sort of from a standpoint of becoming better at Magic, because I mean, both of those things are important. And of course, if we do those things, or if we can make games run smoother in general, there's less takesies, backsies, less feel bads, less missed triggers, less, oh, I forgot to draw my second card off Howling Mine on the next person's turn, right? And then you draw, your answer off the top, and then there's feel bads. Whatever the example is, maybe these tips can help smooth some of that out. So, first tip, casual Commander, can we not just agree that when we mulligan, maybe we get a free mull to 7, because that's the actual rules of multiplayer, but then maybe another free 7 mulligan, right? And then maybe after that a 6, but maybe another 6 after that. I'm talking to my friend Evan the other day, or I seen him post on the Discord. He says that one of his playgroups that he plays in gives 2 free 7 mulligans, then 2 6 mulligans, then 2 5 mulligans. So essentially they're doubling the amount of time you have before you have to mulligan to like 5 or 4 or whatever, right? Give people more cards at the beginning of the game. It's going to be a better game for everybody involved. I think that one's simple. It's not really that techy, but I wanted to mention it just because I've played in a few games of late where somebody did have to mull to 5 or to mull to 4. I figured out later that the Grenzo guy that was mulliganing and then putting the card on the bottom of his library, he was doing that strategically, which is maybe a different topic altogether, but you know what? More people with more cards is going to be more fun. It's a good way to think of it. Next tip. When you sit down, organize your play area the same every time. I've seen some people, when they play a certain deck, they might put their artifacts down beside their lands, but when they play a different deck, they're up beside their creatures. Do it the same way every time. And I know limited table space can sometimes affect that, but if you have a concrete template in your mind, you can kind of invent suitable analogs for how you organize your battlefield. Think of the size of your playmat. Always put your deck on the same side. Always do the same thing with your graveyard and exile. Always put your commander in the same place. Lands, they go where your lands go. Artifacts, they go where your artifacts go. Creatures, enchantments, have a place for all these things, because that's going to make it easier for you to know where everything is when you've got to count your mana. All your mana rocks are going to be where your mana rocks should be. All of the things that have triggers that maybe trigger your upkeep or when something happens, you're going to have all of those in a place. Further to that point, if you are, for example, my friend Jesse, who's on episode 15 and 16, I think, he's got a Slimefoot Aristocrats deck, and him and I were discussing strategy on how to play it and what have you. And I said, when you have multiple aristocrats, like your Blood Artist, Zulaport, Cutthroat, Falconwrath, Noble, Disciple of the Vault, put them all in a pile. And when something dies, you can go trigger, point to that pile, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4. You lose 4, you lose 4, you lose 4. I gain 12, whatever it is. Have them all right there so you can manage all your triggers at once very effectively. Don't just put them down willy-nilly as you draw them and play them, because then one will be over on the left, one will be over on the right, one will be wherever else you had room for it. Put them all in one place. The same can be said for your graveyard and your exile pile. My next tip is never stack your graveyard. And experienced players or players that play competitively already know this, but for newer players or casual players alike, your graveyard exists maybe on the opposite side that of your playmat, like that your library is, or just opposite your library. Bottom card is sort of maybe halfway up your playmat, and then the next one is just down a little bit, then the next card in your graveyard just down a little bit, just down a little bit, just down a little bit. That way you can read the name lines of every card in your graveyard. Then you always know what's in there. It sounds trivial, but it will save you time, because every time you need to see what's in your graveyard, you don't have to put your hand down and pick your graveyard up. Honestly, saving the 4 seconds that takes over the course of 4 games in a night, over the course of 16 to 20 games a month if you play once a week, that's going to save you time. Additionally, when somebody asks you what creatures are in your graveyard, you can literally just turn your head and read them the 2 creatures that are in your graveyard instead of, again, having to put your hand down and pick your graveyard up. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Do the same thing with your exile. And while that is less relevant, it could be relevant. There are cards that pull things from exile, and it is useful to know what you absolutely don't have access to anymore if you aren't playing said cards. Next tip, sticking with the graveyard. If you are playing something like a Storm deck, because that's mostly where this comes up, if you've played multiple spells per turn, or maybe decks that play Aetherflux Reservoir, because that's a fairly popular card, things that you've cast this turn that go to your graveyard, like instants and sorceries, just tilt them maybe like 30 degrees or 40 degrees in your graveyard. So when you look at your graveyard, if you weren't keeping track of your storm count, you can see those tilted 30-degree cards and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, storm count 5. Or Aetherflux Reservoir, you can say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you gain 1, then 2, then 3, then 4 life. The same is sort of true when you are putting multiple tokens into play over the course of several turns. You can have, let's say you're playing a goblin deck and you have 5 goblins in play on the battlefield this turn. You move to your next turn, you put 5 more onto the battlefield. Well, 5 of them have summoning sickness, 5 of them don't. What I found useful in the past is having 2 of the same token, like a goblin token and another goblin token. The 5 that don't have summoning sickness that are ready to attack, you move those up to the top of your playmat, and directly below them, you have the 5 that just came into the battlefield this turn. And that mentally says, okay, these ones are ready to go to the red zone, they're ready to attack, and these ones that are closer to me or closer to my skull clamp are the ones that it's okay for me to skull clamp this turn and have them die, because they can't attack anyways. You're going to spend a little bit less mental energy doing things that way, and it's going to make it quicker for you to play games. The same is kind of true when you're tracking a whole bunch of mana. I see Omnath players do this all the time. Storm players do it. They've got maybe like a green colored token, or more commonly a green D20 or green dice, where they add a mana to their mana pool, and if it's not going to be used right away, like a green Omnath deck or any Storm deck, they tick up the appropriately colored die to represent the mana that's floating in their mana pool. I do this a lot with my Zata deck, where I'm casting ritual, keeping all those rituals tilted sideways in my graveyard, and then I cast my Past in Flames to flash them all back, and I'm ticking up those red dice because my rituals are giving me red mana every time I cast them. Then, if I have a bunch of mana rocks that I need all the mana for prior to sacrificing them for some greater effect like Clark Clan Ironworks or something, I can start to tick up my silver D20 because that represents colorless mana. So I've got a red dice for my red mana, colorless dice for my colorless mana. I've got 2 sets of goblin tokens, one that can attack, one that can't, and I've got my cards tilted sideways in my graveyard to represent that I've cast them this turn. And of course, I do that the same way every time, so I always know what I need to look at to manage my triggers, to see how much mana I have, and to see what I can cast from my graveyard if that's my strategy. So for newer players, those are the few things that I would suggest to you to help smooth your gameplay experience out, to help make it a little bit quicker for you to track everything. You know, here's another thing, mana doublers. Don't just willy-nilly put them all out. If you've got your Caged Sun, your Extra Planar Lens, and your Gauntlet of Power all on the battlefield in different places, maybe you'll forget, and then when you tap your whatever, your mountain or your island or whatever, you'll only add 2 instead of adding 3. If you put them all on the same kind of stack so you can just see their name line, put them down by your mana, so every time you tap a land, you know, oh, this mountain gives me 3, this mountain gives me 3, this mountain gives me 3, every time. So that's another little trick that I do, or I've seen people do, and more memorably, I've seen people not do, where you know, they tap all their land thinking they have 10 mana, and then they play some stuff and go to combat, and then they say, oh, my mana gives me 3. I had 5 more mana that I wasted because I went to combat. And sometimes that's the difference, right? Like in an Omnath deck, 5 mana might mean another creature or an overrun effect or what have you. So those are my suggestions. I hope those help. If you have your own suggestions, of course, leave them in the comments, or let me just know generally on Twitter how you manage your game state or your triggers, or how you've taught new players to do it that is effective. I'd like to hear, because I'm always looking to refine my own process. And of course, I do play with a lot of people that are new to Commander mostly, but also occasionally some people that are new to Magic. So it is important to help these people. That is how we grow the game. That's how we make our own personal communities better. And that's how we keep everything rolling smoothly. So one last little quick section just after this. You know what, everybody? I just wanted to take a quick couple minutes and give everybody kind of the biannual Commander Ad Populum update. We are on episode 30. I know I probably should have done this like at episode 26, but I didn't think of it until just today when I was in the shower. I kind of wanted to just recap the experience thus far, now that I'm about 6 or 6.5 months in or so. So for lack of a better term, amazing. The support has been awesome. Like I had mentioned earlier in the community section, whenever I get an email that says, you know, you helped me do this, or I find the podcast therapeutic, and you know what, that wasn't my intent. My intent was kind of just to tell stories and to appeal to the newer crowd, because I like to teach. I think that I'm good at it. I was a good coach, I thought, and a lot of that when you're working with youth that you're coaching is teaching, and that was always something that I was passionate about. So that was my original intent, but now that I've met some people that have amazing stories, and I've gotten some feedback from people who said that the cast legitimately helped them, that is very meaningful for me and very touching. And I do thank you for that, whether you reached out and gave me a story or you reached out and said that I helped you. Either of those, I do thank you for that, because that is very meaningful. I know I just repeated myself, but you know what? Maybe for emphasis, I'll just leave it in. Next thing, moving forward into 2020, I have been in contact with a few people for various Magic the Gathering events. For today, I want to stick to a few Magic Fests that I've got planned for 2020 that I want to say I'm 100% on 3 of them and maybe 80 to 85% on another. So of course, Las Vegas Magic Fest at the end of August, 100%. I will be there. I'm going to that one. I'm not missing that one unless something extreme happens. And I'm not talking about extreme heat either, because it was like 115 the last time I was there. 100% on Seattle first weekend in June, like June 4th to 7th or something is when I'm going to be there. Huge shout out to Aaron and Amy for helping make that one possible. 100% for Anaheim. I think that one's in November. Shout out to Joe Hoffman, Ginger Joe on Twitter, for making that one possible. Those are the 3 that I will be at. And it's a little bit unfortunate that they're all on the western side of the continent, because I would love to get out east. I'd love to go to Philadelphia, New York, Boston, any of those real old historic cities, because I'm kind of a nerd like that in addition to being a Magic player. The other one that I'm thinking about and about 85% sure on is Minneapolis. I think it's in July, just after the July long weekend. So it's like July 9th or 11th or something. And shout out to the CMDR Central guys, Max and Dana and Chris, and their whole team that they go with, because we might be trying to shack up and maybe produce some extra content as a result of all being in the same place. Not going to promise anything, but I'm certainly looking forward to trying to get there. I would love to sit down with the gentleman from Spike Feeders. If you are into competitive Commander, or CEDH as it's shorthanded, check the Spike Feeders out. I would love to do a piece, because I am fairly casually oriented in both of, or all of my content, I should say, and they are the polar opposite, and I would love to pick their brains and talk to them about their community. And I've been told they're going to Minneapolis. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but I know that they're from, I think, pretty close to there. So if you're going to be at any of those events, come up, let's jam a game. Let's do everything that we do at Magic Fests, food, drinks, after hours, whatever it is. Let's make it happen, because they're a ton of fun. If you've never been to a Magic Fest, I highly encourage you to go. They are free to walk in the door. I believe we've got confirmation that every Magic Fest in 2020 is going to have its own Commander area. So that's great for people like us. You can buy the 4-day pass or the 1-day, like individual passes. I imagine that some of the bigger events are going to have Commander after parties, which are a ton of fun. And of course, vendors, cosplayers, content creators, celebrities in general, panels. It's all good. It all happens at these Magic Fest. Artists, I could go on and on. So I highly encourage people to come. Couple little personal notes and updates. It is about the middle of November today, and we are having a Grey Cup party at my house, myself and Rebecca and all of the CCO Dude Bros. We're going to get together. We are going to get some decks together for our buddy Alex. He is still a little bit struggling with the cops tracking down his stuff, even though they know who stole it, and insurance. So we are going to get together. We're going to build him a deck. I wanted to extend my and his thanks to anybody who offered their general condolences or offered to send him stuff, or who did send him stuff. Huge thanks. That does mean a lot. It makes him feel good. And I'm talking about people from all over the place and locally, because there was, of course, people in our local meta and our LGS and our group of friends that all kind of got together, and we are continuing to get together. We're going to have a potluck and do all that stuff. So if you're into any of that kind of stuff, that stuff happens at Magic Fests too. Like, it's not all magic. Like, you do have to leave the convention center. Like, we got tacos in Vegas. We went out to the bar a whole bunch of times at Calgary in last March. So there's all this extra stuff that you can do, and it's part of being in the community. Too lazy, didn't read, or didn't listen? Sam, you're amazing. New players, do everything you can to keep your battlefield organized. Huge thanks to everybody, both locally and abroad, anywhere else. Big thanks to the patrons. Huge thank you to FusionGamingOnline.com. They are the official sponsors for Commander Ad Populum. You can go there for all of your gaming needs. Everybody, 6 months, checkpoint. It's been crazy. Couldn't do it without you. Hit me up at CADPopcast or Commander Ad Populum on Facebook. Patreon.com/CADPopcast. If you have the financial means to help support the show, help the show grow. You've still got time for Christmas gift altered art commissions. That is my actual real job. So if you are into altered art, hit me up. We can work out a deal, and you can either keep them for yourself or give them for gifts, either or. Of course, same contact details for that. And everybody, I will see you next Wednesday.